Thank you for being with us this afternoon. Javier Becerra, Attorney General for the great state of California. I am pleased to be joined by Senator Holly Mitchell from my hometown of Los Angeles. Yes. Although I guess now that I was born and raised in Sacramento but lived in L.A.,
That's okay. You can still play.
hometown. Okay, my L.A. home for many years. And we're also joined by Dr. Gina Solomon, who is someone who will give us insight not just as someone who has a degree in medicine but also in public health, who can talk about the importance of today's announcement relating to lead and cadmium in jewelry. I want to also make sure I mention some of the team here at the Department of Justice who has made today's announcement possible. And we are joined by some of the folks on our team. I'd like to make sure I recognize Scott Lichtig. Scott Lichtig is the attorney who's been working this case most directly that we're going to be talking about, Deputy Attorney General. Arsenio Matakas, who is a special assistant to the Attorney General, is here. Harrison Pollack, who is the supervising Deputy Attorney General. Mario DiBernardo, who is Deputy Attorney General, but he works in my legislative unit. Somerset Perry is the Deputy Attorney General, but she is not here at this time. Today, we've taken an important step forward in protecting Californians from harmful exposure to lead and cadmium, two dangerous and highly toxic metals that can cause serious health issues for all people who are contacted or who make contact with that. Issues that are especially pronounced affect our children and women who are pregnant. A child who ingests lead is at risk of learning disabilities, behavioral problems, stunted growth, and impaired hearing. For pregnant women, I think we've all heard this before, lead poisoning can cause miscarriage, it can cause stillbirth, and it can lead to premature births. And cadmium can cause kidney damage and weaken bones. No one would knowingly wear jewelry that contains these metals around their neck, or let a child put this type of jewelry in their mouth. But that's happening every day because these hazardous materials have been used to add weight or to make jewelry sparkle a little bit more. It's the inexpensive jewelry that most modest income Americans can afford. And it looks pretty good. And so they buy it. And they buy it without the knowledge that it may be harmful to them or their children. The public deserves to know when they are buying products that expose them to toxic materials. Today, we are announcing a settlement against 5 companies that endangered consumers by selling and distributing tainted jewelry that exposed parents and children to needless hidden risk. I'm going to name those companies. Piers JS Inc., Obadibum Inc., better known as Sons Trading, Andrea and Paulo Corporation. They do business as Andrea Bijou, 7 Star Fashion Accessory, and LaBelle Merchandise Company. These companies, operating in both Los Angeles County in some cases, or in other cases in Santa Clara counties, sold jewelry for adults and children that contained lead or cadmium at levels that exceeded the legal limit. In some cases, the levels exceeded the legal limit by 1,000 times. And one of those companies even labeled the jewelry lead-free, despite knowing that it contained unlawful levels of lead. Today's settlement not only awards the state of California more than $83,000 in monetary damages, it sends a message to any company who would put profit ahead of the public's health. Don't do it. It doesn't pay. The California Department of Justice will hold you accountable. This settlement also includes some orders for these companies to comply with so that they will make sure, and we will make sure, that they are abiding by all states, statutes, and regulations that are related to the distribution and sale of jewelry in California, so no consumer is put at risk again. Here, I think it's important to mention something very important. In some cases, we are providing a credit on part of the penalty that some of these companies would have paid because they have agreed to go through the process of initiating an on-site program to sample all of the materials in the jewelry that they are selling to make sure it complies with lead and cadmium standards before they offer it for sale. To comply with this requirement, these particular defendants can use either the device that's often used called an XRF device or the analytical testing methods provided in the metal in jewelry law. The only company of the 5 that I mentioned that did not accept this sampling credit is Andrea and Paulo Corporation. This settlement also includes orders for these companies to comply with not just the statutes, but also to recognize that it's going to be on them to do this right. But this settlement is just one important step. It's not the last step. And that is why Senator Holly Mitchell is here today, because we must continue to not only go after those companies that would put our children and our spouses at risk, we must also raise the standards. That's what we do in California. We always try to lift the bar because we try to do better for the health and safety of our people. We must protect our children. We must protect our pregnant spouses and mothers. And we must protect modest income communities that look to this jewelry as a way to be able to treat and reward their loved ones and show them that they care, but hopefully do it in ways that are safe. And so it is time to create a system that will protect them. And here is where Senator Mitchell has come in to help Californians. She has introduced Senate Bill 647. This is a bill that I'll let her explain that I am supporting and sponsoring because it takes us to the next level in California. We're always about leaning forward. Senator Mitchell is about doing what's best for the people of our great state. And I want to make sure she has an opportunity to explain how we're going to use the best practices that we know of in the United States, in Canada, and in the European Union to advance California's safety standards for the good of all Californians. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Solomon to give us the real understanding of what it means to have lead and cadmium in the jewelry that our children may be holding and putting in their mouths, or that our pregnant mothers and future mothers may be using without knowing that they're doing this. So with that, let me turn it over now to Senator Holly Mitchell.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I want to thank the Attorney General and all the Deputy Attorneys General for your enforcement actions you announced today. I think they're both timely, appropriate, and much appreciated. I'd say timely because Mother's Day is fast approaching, and that's certainly a holiday with those of us who are mothers are looking for and expecting some jewelry. And so we certainly appreciate this current conversation about jewelry that is safe for us, without question. And additionally, Mr. Attorney General, your action in support of SB 647 underscores the need for stronger consumer protections for cosmetic jewelry. Protecting women and children from the harmful risk associated with lead and cadmium in jewelry is the goal of SB 647. I was reminded when I walked in and I looked at the pictures posted, there were some questions raised by, I think, probably some of my male colleagues in the First Policy Committee, where they weren't quite sure how children could ingest the lead and cadmium. And when I walked in and saw the barrettes, I had an immediate flashback. You may not have had to wear pigtails, exactly. Okay, and so when that barrette is on the end of that pigtail, it's just a natural, very easy thing when you're studying, when you're nervous, whatever, particularly if you're younger, to take that barrette and pop it in your mouth, particularly these barrettes that just by their sheer look fruity and perhaps sweet. And so these images, I think, are a really good representation of what happens with young children and how we've got to take these actions to make sure that they are protected. Again, SB 647 strengthens California's lead and cadmium jewelry law by establishing science-based standards that have demonstrated success in federal law, Canada, and Europe. When California's metal-containing jewelry law was passed back in 2006, it was based on science that at that time was well established. Since then, however, the science has improved and it has become abundantly clear that California's law is outdated, inadequate, and potentially dangerous to consumers. The federal government, Canada, and the European Union and the World Health Organization all endorse a more rigorous standard than is currently California law. So as a result, SB 647 aims to do four things. It adopts the federal standard for lead in children's jewelry, which is 100 parts per million. Secondly, it establishes a cadmium standard for paint and surface coating of children's jewelry pursuant to international standards, which is less than 75 parts per million. Third, it amends the definition of children's jewelry to conform with Canada's definition, which is 15 years of age and younger. And finally, it applies the European Union-led jewelry standard of less than 500 parts per million to jewelry designed for adults. That, in short, is what the bill does. Again, we're looking forward to the opportunity to continuing to push it through the legislature. I think we get a little wind beneath our sails today based on the actions you've taken. We appreciate your support for the bill.
Thank you. Dr. Solomon.
Thank you, and I'm very happy to be here today. My name is Dr. Gina Solomon. I'm a clinical professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. I've dedicated my career to protecting children and families from toxic chemicals in their environment. I've seen patients directly affected by toxic chemicals. I've seen children in my clinic whose potential has been stunted by exposure to lead and other toxic substances. And I also have recognized that the most important thing to do doesn't happen in the clinic. It happens in the realm of prevention, where we can change policies upstream so that the children won't end up in our clinics sick with the effects of lead poisoning and cadmium toxicity or any other effects of toxic chemicals. And when I say toxic chemicals, you have to realize that whenever anyone talks about toxic chemicals, lead is at the absolute top of the list. It is always number one as the most hazardous chemical that we encounter in our environment. It's a metal. It's actually naturally occurring, but it's well underground. But mining activities bring lead to the surface, and it has been incorporated into a myriad of things, so that it's very difficult to avoid exposure to lead. Back in the pre-industrial era, when you look at the bones of ancient humans, the lead levels were 0. But now every single one of us here in this room has lead in our bodies. So what does lead do? Well, it sneaks into our bodies because, when a child, for example, sucks on a barrette or a little charm around their neck, not only do some of those look like candy, as Senator Mitchell pointed out, but lead actually has a sweet flavor. So it actually tastes a little bit sweet. And it mimics both calcium and iron in our systems so that it's avidly absorbed by our intestine. It's not kept out of our bodies. That absorption is accelerated in kids who are deficient in calcium or iron. So kids that have any nutritional deficiencies are far more susceptible. And then once it's in our bodies, it travels around, and it's like tentacles. There are effects in various organ systems, our kidneys, and that's where cadmium comes in too. Both lead and cadmium are double whammy on kidney function. And then there are effects on the bone marrow, but most notably on the brain. And lead has been well established, many, many studies over many decades in kids, showing decrements in intelligence, sadly, in IQ, increased hyperactivity, difficulty with self-control, difficulty paying attention and concentrating on tasks. and even difficulty controlling their mood, which can lead to increased likelihood of everything from not graduating from high school to an increased risk of ending up incarcerated in the future. All of this, it seems crazy, but it's true, is associated with exposure to lead. Now, there's good news, actually excellent news, which is that enormous steps have occurred in recent years to reduce kids' exposure to lead. And so kids these days are exposed to much less lead than we were when we were growing up. And so I actually, just thrilled about that series of public health victories. But it's a matter of chipping away at all the many sources of lead. And this announcement today is a really important chip. It really will further reduce an avoidable source of exposure to kids. And therefore, it's a wonderful thing to celebrate that kids will be even more protected in California from lead in jewelry and even in jewelry that they might encounter that is from their mom or their adult family members, because we know that kids get into that stuff. So this is great, and thank you and happy to answer questions.